Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'll introduce myself again in a minute, but my name is Dwayne Lindsay. I am your moderator or co-moderator for the day. Also DJ, other titles can come along with that. Still letting folks in from the waiting room here and there, so don't mind if I'm looking between screens. Anywho, we're gonna share screens for the first few minutes, and then we'll turn it off to start the roundtable. But wanted to welcome you to the ACUHO-I Business Operations Series. Our May theme is staffing strategies due to COVID-19 and returning to the workplace. Before we jump in, we have a few general ACUHO-I slides. So just here are some additional ACUHO-I online resources. We also send a follow-up email to all of our attendees, so feel free, you don't have to jump into these now. We're going to include this link in our follow-up email just so you all can stay engaged with us. Also, some upcoming virtual offerings. We also include a link to this in the email I just referenced, but these include all of the ACUHO-I roundtables and connection points for the month of May. Sorry, again, we have a few more folks in the waiting room. Okay, a few notes about today's session. The session is being recorded. You probably were familiar with Zoom these days, so you can see the icon in the top. We also want to encourage you to use chat to introduce yourself. So state your name, position, institution. It's great so far. Folks are already entering their info in chat, and you can see folks from the West Coast to the East to Mid. So it's great that we have a wide range of folks joining us. We also, in terms of format, we wanted to let you all know that today's roundtable is a Zoom meeting. It's not a webinar. With the intention that we want it to be conversation based. We want it to be interactive with the audience. So we have some awesome panelists that we'll introduce in a minute, but we also will turn it over to you all to go ahead and unmute yourself or ask questions from the chat and really engage in your experience. And again, of course, you can ask just questions. If able, when you're engaging with us, we ask you to turn on your webcam camera and of course, unmute yourself, but when you're not engaging, please mute yourself. I think, again, we're all familiar with Zoom etiquette 14 months into this phase we're in. Again, use the chat function to keep the conversation going. Rather, if it's questions or if you want to respond to someone, definitely, again, encourage the chat feature. And then, like similar to the introductions, when engaging, chat or out loud, if you can just restate your name and your institution, just so we know who we're engaging with throughout today's session. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel today to get started. Really quick, again, my name is Dwayne Lindsay. I'm the moderator. I am the Executive Project Analyst at University of California, Davis, Student Housing and Dining Services, and I also serve on the Business Operations Planning Committee. I'm going to introduce our panel on the screen, and they'll actually be able to introduce themselves further next. Ramona Hernandez, Director of Business and Financial Services at UC Davis, Student Housing and Dining. Sarah Dundish, Director, Housing and Strategic Initiatives, UC Los Angeles, Housing and Hospitality Services. And Kenny, I'm sorry, I said your name earlier, and if I butcher your last name, just correct me, but Mock, is that correct? Okay, perfect. Sorry, I think it's this pressure of being a moderator is getting to me. Director of Housing Operations and Outreach, University of Houston, Student Housing and Residential Life. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. I also want to give a quick note that Ramona is going to be a co-moderator, and she's going to help lead some of the conversation and the flow of today once we get going. So give me one moment, and I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to say the question out loud, and I'll also put it in the chat so you all can see what I'm saying. So give me one moment here. Okay, so the hardest question for today for our panelists, again, putting it in the chat. Please introduce yourself, your position and oversight, your institution, and how many beds and staff you have in your operation.
Okay, so I will get started. So as Dwayne shared, my name is Ramona Hernandez. I serve as the Director of Business and Financial Services. I have been with UC Davis Student Housing and Dining Services for, it'll be 20 years in June. I'm currently responsible for our budget, rate setting, capital plan, financial side of that, as well as human resources. I have until 3 years ago was also overseeing what we called residential services. That's where our contracting was. And then had started at Davis 20 years ago overseeing our P3 housing, and we have a lot of P3 housing, so I've got that experience as well. We have, there's, gosh, Dwayne, I think like 35,000 students on campus is kind of what we're looking at on the main Davis campus. We're going to have 6,500 or more in residence halls. We are planning for triples, and then we talk about that another time. 3,300 in on-campus student apartments, and then about another 20, almost 3,000 under our P3 housing areas. Staffing wise, we have about, I'd say 600 career staff and another 1,500 plus student staff. And we're a full shop, so we are not bifurcated. We have everything under our oversight at Davis.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Sarah Dundish here from UCLA. So my role is overseeing the housing contracts, the database, kind of like the guts of the system to keep it all going. We are bifurcated at UCLA, so my role is really the business side of everything. And all in, we're just shy of 20,000 beds, and that includes our undergraduate and graduate students. And through all of this and through COVID, right, we've shrunk down tremendously. So, looking forward to talking to you guys about that. Part of also my role is just some of the planning, thinking about what we're going, how we're doing in the future. So the future builds, the occupancy, what do we need? How many triples do we need? If you're familiar with UCLA, you probably might know that we really, really love our triples here. So this has been a very interesting year. But we also have the hospitality side under our portfolio as well. So we have our Luskin Conference Center, our guest house, and Lake Arrowhead Center. And as you've probably been watching, the hospitality industries have been very heavily affected, just like our student housing. So two industries that have been really thrown for a loop this past year. So looking forward to talking to you about our staffing models. Thanks.
Hi there. I'm Kenny Mock and Director of Housing Operations and Outreach at the University of Houston. We are a public institution, 4-year, a Carnegie Tier 1 ranked institution as well. We have approximately 47,000 students that attend our main campus. And I said earlier, and I think anybody that works with business will appreciate, we have 8,397 beds, just shy of 8,400, and that includes apartments and residential beds. Our staff here is comprised of about, within our Housing and Residential Life program, about 40 to 45 full-time professional staff. We also employ about 400 student staff. We are one of the largest employers on our campus. For my title with Operations and Outreach means different things to different people. I often sort of lump it into 3 large categories, and that is the built environment, which is going to be working with our team and our staff who work with our facilities and liaise with those operations, housekeeping, large in-house projects, small in-house projects, all of those things. And then our managed environment, which is our housing database system, assignments, processes. And then also I work with our risk and emergency management staff here as well. Of course, what comes along with all of those things is close work with our budget oversight, capital planning, strategic planning, all of those fun things that I think many of us do day to day.
Great, thank you, panelists. Really quick before turning it back to them, we actually wanted to engage with you all via poll. So we're gonna launch a poll really quick. And so how many of the following staffing strategies did your department utilize due to COVID-19? It's a multiple choice, so feel free again to choose multiple as multiple choices. So layoff, furlough, reassignments, incentivized early retirement, hiring freeze, a vacancy program, any other. Definitely again engage in the chat and let us know there. So we'll keep the poll open for a little bit longer. From here, we're going to go on. We'll go into question 2, which will continue the conversation, and then again, as mentioned earlier, we'll engage with the audience to see if you all have any experiences you want to share. So looking at, we have a pretty good response rate. I'll keep another 10 seconds. Keep the poll open. We're about 80%, so I'm gonna wrap it up. I always like to linger to see if there's any last minute responses. So I'm gonna go ahead and share results. So it's looking at, it's pretty wide ranging. Hiring freeze was definitely the highest choice, 68%. And again, multiple choice. So obviously folks were able to enter whatever options were for them. But as you can see, there was definitely a good range of options. Few folks, or actually one person said other. No pressure, but feel free if you want to respond in the chat so we know what the other is. On that note, going straight into it, I'm going to go ahead and go into question 2. And I'll put it in the chat first. So question 2 for the panelists. How has COVID-19 impacted your staffing models, and what are some of the strategies you have implemented to pivot?
Well, I'll go ahead and start. So, I would say on our staffing model, so I imagine many places are like this. So, March 2020 happened and we were fully staffed and on a growth pattern, and everybody, we sent all students home that wanted to go home. So I think at that point we had about 6,000 plus on campus in our res halls, and we got down to, I think, under 1,000. So what it really impacted was with our service, service staff, custodial wise, we still needed them for all the cleaning protocols, but the dining staff, and any of you that are familiar with the UC system, and I can see some folks that are here, the UC decided to do pay continuation through June 30, and then we shifted to, I think each campus chancellor deciding if they were going to do layoffs. And so I know at UC Davis, our chancellor decided that he wanted to avoid layoffs as much as possible. So we moved into reassignments. I understand some other campuses have done this as well, but one thing really cool about UC Davis is, given we're research one level institution, they pivoted with the, I hate that word, I just used it. They utilized some technology on campus to create our own COVID test. So we were able to send some staff there to staff that operation. We had contact tracers, we were able to move some staff there. And then because we were a full operation, we took dining, and a lot of our culinary and utility staff were converted to custodial staff, not only in our within our department, but also on campus custodial, as well as we sent a small number of people over to the health system. We have UC Davis is affiliated with a hospital in Sacramento. So did I answer your question, Dwayne? Is it in there? Yeah, so that was, I'd say, we did, because the way our contracts are written, we had a handful of people who HR would slap my hand if I said this out loud, but I'm going to say it anyway. They voluntarily laid off. We really were at the point where, okay, and that's a temporary layoff, so they keep their benefits, but they go without pay, and they have to pay their portion of that benefit that would normally come out of their paycheck. So we've got maybe a dozen people in that boat, and the plan is then to furlough 95% of the dining staff this summer, because we're going to be virtually closed. Our custodial staff are going to be on special projects, many of them over on campus, and then we plan to be full blast in the fall. We're getting green lights from campus leadership in Yolo County, which we are the big employer within Yolo County here in the Sacramento region, in Northern California, and we plan to have triples. So we were just having that conversation today about demand and how we're going to fill the beds. So we'll need all our staff back.
And I'll pick it up after Ramona. So at the UCLA campus, when COVID hit, similar to, I know most everybody, right? We became a ghost town pretty much overnight, and that's really our undergraduate housing. So for perspective, our undergraduates were about 15,000 students, and our graduates are about 3,600. So our graduate students weren't affected that much. They're mostly in apartments, mostly have their own bedrooms. They were cool just to ride it out. But our undergraduates really like vacated. So we went from 15,000 to about 700 to 600 for the rest of spring quarter. Despite all of our different our different scenarios, our different prioritizations, our different working with our local county Department of Public Health, LACDPH, it just didn't come through. And I know some of my other local campuses can commiserate, but we were completely restricted for this entire year. So we could only house students with literally no other safe alternative on campus. So we've stayed at 700 students this entire year with no option to increase in our winter quarter or our spring quarter. And actually even now, as vaccinations are about to complicate most of our lives, right, summer is still the same, right? We are riding that wave until very hopeful in next academic year, we're going to be back with triples. We're all going to somehow miraculously figure out what vaccine requirements look like on our campus, and we're going to go full board. Because in our housing environment, everyone is really talking about that V-shaped recovery. Our chancellor committed early on, there would be no layoffs because of COVID. And because there were no layoffs, it even affected typically because everything at UCLA is in-house, nothing's third-party managed. Even our dining, which we typically curtail over the summer, just for summer business, was a no-go. So we had to carry our entire staff in housing and likewise in hospitality, which was equally affected for the entire duration. So then we came up with, a lot of the things that I think a lot of you have had to kind of tap into, which is reassignments, just natural attrition right from our service industry. We did have a small amount of people come participate in kind of a modified early retirement program we called voluntary separation, which helped just kind of create some more spots. The other thing that we have going on at UCLA is we're about to open this next year a little over 3,000 beds, and then 2022 another 2,200 beds. So within 2 years, we're opening 5,300 beds. So this idea was, no, you're coming right back. Don't get rid of anybody and do what you can to manage with just through attrition, reassignments, and then manage through growth, right? So we're not going to hire at the same levels we would have projected this next year and the year after. And we're going to do everything we can to be more efficient, do more with less, which I imagine is a very similar theme across all of the campuses that are here. Do more with less, right? It's just like for always and forever, and COVID hasn't really changed that. So that's what our biggest way we've been able to do it. The other thing that is interesting at UCLA, our reassignment meant that we shared our team with our facilities, our campus custodial, our student health centers that set up testing sites, but we still carried the bill. We got to send our team members, but we kept their payroll on our books. So a lot of this has just been figuring out housing, suck it up and deal with it, and make sure that your team members are taken care of, which, in the end has been really great for our team. It's allowed for our institutional knowledge to be maintained. And now we're starting to really get ready for who do we look like in the next iteration when we are full board. And I know we'll talk a little bit about reimagining our workplace, but all out, we lost about 378 million. Our net was around 250. And we're continuing to figure out our way out of it, but carrying our staff through the entire time.
University of Houston has a somewhat similar story. All of our services are not under one roof. And so we were able to keep all of our full-time staff employed. We did shift at least one position to working as a COVID-19 response manager, just because we knew there would be decreased occupancy in all of our buildings. But we did keep all of our buildings open. We wanted to continue to provide those options for students who may need housing. And so, of course, we took a huge hit to our occupancy. We diminished from about 94% to 20% overnight, like many of you in the stories that we've heard. When we did shift to management, we quickly hired. We had 2 positions that we were hiring at the time, right about that time. And man, we were rushing to get some of the paperwork done to hire those folks. One of them happened to be our program coordinator for risk and emergency management. So we were fortunate enough to fill those roles. But then we also had several positions that were vacant that we kept vacant and chose to keep vacant for those purposes. we are looking at reopening all of those positions and hiring for those things. But I think it's also important to talk about our student staff when we think about in terms of what our staffing looks like. At the University of Houston, we allowed our student staff, many of them resigned their positions and left when COVID happened, but we knew we needed to stay open. So I'm talking specifically the RA staff. And so we allowed folks to do that. And for the fall term, we hired about 50% of what we typically would hire in the RA teams. We did hire and continue to fund all of our 24-hour desk operations the same. So we did hire a full complement of desk staff to do that. As we begin to think about other places, we were well into the process of working with ACUHO-I interns for the summer. We were able to work our perspective that rather than being in person, they work remotely for us. We have another intern that's going to be with us this summer who is going to be on campus. And so we're looking forward to that. So I think it's important to consider those student staff as well. The other complement of staff who we work with through contractual arrangements are our facilities, housekeepers, dining teams, all of those things within the University of Houston did see reduction in force, layoffs, some changes in staffing structure. But so we had to work real carefully with those to ensure that our needs were still covered with disinfection protocols, things of that nature. And then our dining halls have never closed either. We did close one residential dining facility and shifted everything to the operation there. So sort of in a nutshell, that's where we were. I think as a department, I'm really proud that we were able to keep all of our staff employed. We saw a significant hit to our reserves. The arc of our history at U of H is 10, 12 years ago. Our program was operating in the red with 0 reserves and incurring more and more debt to the university. And in that time, we were able to, I say this joking, but with some sincerity as well, we clawed our way out of that and had chunked up a $28 million reserves. And we were really excited about that. And you can imagine that's gone. And so it was really a tough hit, but really proud that we worked as hard as we did to keep as many staff employed and not had terminations, reduction in forces, and things like that.
Thank you, Kenny. So I wanted to, we have a couple, canned questions to keep the conversation going. But before we get to those, wanted to ask, does anyone have a specific question or just something they want to share? Certainly the three of us here are sharing our perspectives, and as any of us know in housing, it's such a wide variety of different nuances. So anything you want to ask or share along on this topic? Feel free to put it in the chat or to unmute yourself. That's okay too. So Dwayne, you want to ask the next question?
Yeah. Thanks, Ramona. So again, we'll do that after every question, just so you all have the opportunity to interact and share your experience, especially if, one thing to recognize is our wonderful panelists all represent larger institutions. So if there is any mid-size or smaller, feel free to also share your experience as well. So moving on, let me go ahead and put it in the chat. So this actually follows Kenny's last point really well. I mean, all of the panelists, but Kenny's point about just general staffing and vacancies. How has your campus department handled impacts to hiring and recruitment, hiring freezes, vacancy programs, etc., and has or will anything change for the new academic fiscal year, both fitting?
I think what's the tricky part, well, I'll share this with you. We have a vice chancellor that's been in his role since July, came from another UC campus. But one message that we've heard from him is he really does not want to be short-sighted and make business decisions that save us money now, but long-term are going to impact the student experience. So I think in terms of staffing, I think that's one reason why with not doing layoffs, because I don't know about the rest of you, but it takes a while to recruit. Regardless of the time the person steps in the door for onboarding, and then that 12 to 18 months to really get them fully up to speed, just to get them in the door can take a while. So really happy that we have really avoided layoffs. And I know some campuses have not had that luxury. Let me see the other part of the question. So yeah, I think we are, we're in a good space. What I'm hearing now, and I did hear from another colleague at another UC campus. So we did reassign staff, and we're being really clear that we need them back. We want them back. So we've already lost some of them because they've chosen to either take another job on campus or somewhere else. We're hearing that some of the folks that they're great employees, they're like, oh, no, we need them. It's like, no, we want them back. Unlike what Sarah described, where, LA has been paying that salary, it has been a benefit to us because in the reassignments, that other department has paid the salary to give us the salary savings. So I think we're going to have some interesting dynamics in the fall when people come back, if they come back. We're also hearing, we have cooks who've been working as custodians for the last year, and now they need to get back in the kitchen with COVID protocols. Some of them may not have been working since prior to COVID in the culinary role, especially if they were lower on the seniority list. So I think from an HR standpoint, we're going to see a lot of just kind of dealing with people getting back into the swing of things and as you imagine, I think all the students, if we get clearance to have triples, these kids want to be back on campus. They want to be there, and they're going to have all the stuff they bring with them. And so our staff are going to be rusty. We're going to need to kind of really be prepared for some transition at that time.
Yeah, I think for us, the hiring freezes, I kind of talked a little bit about in our answer. I think a lot of concern is just the time it's going to take to ramp back up. So I might just focus, very similar to everything Ramona said. So the one thing that we're working on, and we don't have it solved yet, so I'm just kind of putting it out there for the dialogue, is one of the ways our student staffing, we had about a little over 700, 800, plummeted to nothing. And we, held our jobs for our career staff. But when we are going back to an environment and we're opening a building next year, so we are going to be over 15,000 on just our on campus, and then about another 2,000 undergraduates in our off campus. We need our student staff back in force, but they haven't been here and they haven't been engaged. And as many of you know, our first year students right now have never even stepped foot on the campus. So us to execute our huge fall move-in and what that looks like, and all of our safety security positions, even our RA positions, we're trying to be right now creative and haven't solved it on how we begin that summer recruitment. How do we invite them back in an enticing enough way through housing, dining, getting onboarded, mini orientations, just get them pumped about the campus that they feel largely disenfranchised from, and figuring out ways that we can make it exciting so that when we do invite the rest of the student population back, move-in feels like a huge fun extravaganza and like no one's missed a beat. So that's right. Like I said, I don't have great solutions yet, but that is definitely something we are hot and heavy in the middle of chewing on right now, because we want to make sure that our move-in feels like every other move-in with all the fanfare, but also the students that we're asking to work it feel like they're truly a part of our campus in a way that they haven't been, and manage all the COVID protocols and mitigations at the same time somehow. So that's just one aspect of it that I think might be interesting for this group.
I want to say too, as we talk about what these things really mean for us, we're cautiously optimistic. We know that our university is planning to be back on campus with our full offering of face-to-face courses in the fall term. That's the plan. And so that's the plan we're working. And that means a full host of everything. So we are still going forward with all of our vacant positions and hiring those positions. We do have to seek authorization to hire them in ways now that we never did before, and justification and so forth. Our student staff, we did hire our student staff at 50% for the fall opening, and we're watching our agreements and leases for the fall. And as our students self-assign into their buildings, and then as our occupancy in buildings has increased is when we're authorizing to hire more staff. That'll help us out a little bit in terms of ensuring that our student staff is where it really needs to be. We'd rather be cautious and take time to hire them than hire a full host and then have to dismiss several of them because we can't afford it. We also, I didn't mention earlier with our student staff, last year, we had already offered positions to a full host of summer positions, conference assistants, and those staff members, and had to rescind all of those offers. And that was really difficult, especially considering what things were looking like. We did maintain those student names, and every time there was an opening, we reached out to them. We do have privatized housing that's on campus, it's privately managed. When they needed staff, we provided them with some of that same information. So we really worked hard with our students in terms of those plans. Also want to, Dave, I saw your comments in terms of it has been a weird year. And the CARES Act funding is really an interesting piece. We at U of H are currently, a few weeks ago, I did a lot of legwork on what we needed to submit to get some of that funding for ourselves as well. And then even beyond that, with some of the emergency federal and state here in Texas funds that were available, we worked closely with our financial aid office so that if students were living on campus, we were able to supplement them $2,000 towards their housing cost alone, just because they lived on campus. We were able to allocate some of that money. And that was done with the thought of future and maintaining and helping our students today. But yeah, thanks, Dave, for that comment about CARES Act. I think there's a lot of fodder there for folks.
And I'll just add on the CARES Act, or I guess the new term is HEFR, H-E-E-F-R 2 and 3. You know, I could just, my observation is we were in a hole that we were waiting for a lawsuit settlement, which came in just the summer before COVID, and we're going to start digging ourselves out of the hole. So I think because we were in a financial, campus, either we're going to have to get a loan from campus or get a loan from the system, or if the chancellor says we're not laying anybody off, someone's got to cover that backstop. So we ended up getting $16 million in CARES funds the first round last summer, and then we have our hands up right now for more, and we've made some cases logically as to why we think we should get at least $8 million more from the second rounds. Our concern is now that it looks like we're going to have a lot more income than we initially planned in our budget submission, that they may go, you don't need it. So we'll see. It's my observation, and from my UC colleagues, and some of you are on the call, it seems like every campus, it just depends on if they feel if you have reserves, or if they're going to let you just kind of hang out there. I don't see any rhyme or reason to it, but that's my opinion on that topic. Okay, so Dwayne, do we have, well, let me just, I know we talked about CARES, we had some good chatter there in the box.
And on that, Sarah, not to put pressure on you, did you want to share anything about CARES funding for UCLA? Again, you can say.
Yeah, no, I can definitely share. I'm similar. I know Epi put in there for Berkeley what they did, and we're very similar. So we were able to get CARES funding around $17 million for just the loss that we could prove on the books for everybody moving out from last spring quarter. And then similar to what Ramona was talking about, the UC system did offer loan services. So we did take a loan from our UC system to kind of keep we're not making our debt coverage ratio, our reserve ratio got blown up, similar to what Kenny was talking about, but they said, yeah, you did a good job building those reserves. You go ahead and use them. Here's the loan, write it out, get your reserves back to where they should be. And fairly certain that's going to be the extent of the help that we're getting. I mean, it was huge help, right? We had a $125 million loan that we got from our UC system, and that's really what we're doing versus I don't anticipate we'll get the second helping of CARES funding, and it will be more targeted towards our students if UCLA does get another helping with the HERF Act.
You know, and I know this topic is around HR, so I think we talked a little bit about this. I will share in terms of staff coming back in teleworking, and we were chatting, that the three panelists, we were chatting before we started, and shared some interesting things about that. I can tell you, I actually just did a little count. So of our approximately 600 career staff, 85% have to be on campus. They are in positions that, you know, student facing and must be there, or supervisors directly. We have about 15% that either are teleworking 100% or some combination of that. UC Davis is discussing what we're calling reimagining the work site, and actually really trying to push the envelope here. And the key word is flexibility. So it could be everything from more staff teleworking, and I think they're looking at, we at Davis, I don't know if other campuses have the physical space constraint. So we've had to go out and lease office space in town for administrative staffs as our campus has grown and they want more academic staff on the physical campus. So they're looking to have some savings there by having those administrative staff, more of them work remotely. We're also talking about flexibility. Is there more options for 10s or 980s, or even for staff that are on site? You know, that is there something to try to balance? Because there is this kind of haves and have-nots of, well, you know, I had a staff email me a week or two ago saying, well, all the administrative staff just get to sit home, kick back and watch their computer all day. Well, I have to be here and I'm risking my life because I'm cleaning. And, you know, there's that perception and kind of the big thing on our campus, and some of you may have this, is parking. I am telecommuting. I am saving $60 a month, and, you know, we're paying parking. Some people may say that's cheap. Some people may say that's expensive, but the people who are on site saying it's not fair that I have to pay for parking and you don't. Well, I don't have to go to campus. So I think we're going to have some of that going on. I will say that we're working on looking at maximizing flexibility. And I'll share the story I shared with Sarah. I think our human resources department had a really good taste of it. We had a great analyst in their comp department that UCLA HR apparently recruited away for higher salary, 100% remote. So she's living in Davis still. And any of you familiar with California, that's Northern California, and LA is in Southern California. So I think that also incentivized our HR department to, we're going to lose good staff. And especially as any of the staff that are in more administrative type roles where there is in the private sector competition with them being able to work remotely, besides the fact that they pay better, we're going to have to compete there. So I think that's another thing that we're in that conversation, we're in that process right now. So if Sarah or Kenny have anything to add on that topic.
Yeah, we're pretty similar to what Ramona was describing. So we have about 1,400 career staff, and we're going to come in just a little around 100 that are going to be some form of hybrid telecommuting for our first draft, right? And I think there might be a little bit of an awakening as we move into fall quarter. And I'm not sure which way it's going to go, right? We're either going to start losing people left and right to even our own central campus and administrative roles that are offering more telecommuting than all of us in our service industry and student facing. Or we're going to realize that maybe we were a little too aggressive in how much we're still having some of our team members come in, and there might be some more opportunities for creativity. But for our first blush at it, I think we're relatively modest in what we're saying can continue. And it really is, out of the 100 that I'm speaking of, it's really those more administrative, just like, you know, everyone was talking about administrative, managerial, where being at home in front of a computer, and like, I know there's days I'm like, we're just all catching up on so much work because we're not in the office, you know, putting out fires, that's how it's going to continue moving forward. So I think time will tell, and I'm not sure which way the awakening is going to come, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be something happening in fall quarter one way or the other.
I would say the University of Houston has been really flexible throughout the pandemic in terms of our remote work environment and telecommuting as it is. It's a really touchy subject for me as I think about it, because our university and our leadership is promoting some compassion, and we're going to do lots of things with care, but has largely left the decision up to the vice presidents of the various divisions at the university to make. And honestly, I feel like there's been a harder line in the sand as it relates to telecommuting here. And that for us means that by August 2nd, all positions will be returned to campus as they normally have. That's the plan. And we don't have the opportunity for a lot of flexibility. And that doesn't feel good when you begin to think about the type of year we've all had. And I think that, quite honestly, it's really tough to manage those things. And I think, like many things, as directors and leaders in our program, when we have to really think about what that means for our staff, and how do we enforce and toe the line with our teams when we don't necessarily feel good about the policies either. I'm excited about returning to work. I think I'm excited about seeing students. I've been back in my office physically 5 days a week since March. Much of our team in housing has been working physically within their offices 3 days a week. But those extra 2 days, like, again, if Houston's a major metropolitan area, you can live, well, even my example, I live about 3 miles from campus, and it takes me about 30 minutes to get here each day by car. So if you live in one of our outlying suburbs, I know people that commute an hour and a half each way to and from campus. And so that telecommute piece is really important, I think, for some employee satisfaction. And I am hopeful that as we enter into the fall term, and the university leadership, of which I feel like I'm a part, is able to begin to have some conversations about possibly reimagining what that looks like. I don't believe that what I am perceiving as a line in the sand right now, or a hard line, is necessarily one that cannot be rediscussed down the road a little bit. It's a really tough issue.
Thanks for sharing that, Kenny. I'm thinking of, there's a term in housing, heads and beds, and I've heard an HR manager say butts and seats, in terms of staff teleworking, that kind of old school, they're not working unless I can see them. And, I think any of us who, with technology, they could be sitting there on instant message and having a side conversation for 45 minutes, and you think they're working. So it's really not about physically seeing folks. It's about, how do we measure productivity in this new environment? I know that's been conversations we've been having on the HR side here at Davis. Let me take a peek at the chat. Thanks, Lisa, for sharing. At UCI is evaluating which positions are best suited for on-campus. Continue remote, and yeah, we're doing that. We're also having conversations, I don't know, along those lines, even with office space, because we are growing our program. So someone was asking me last week, well, I need an office, and I'm like, well, I'm not giving up any of my offices until I know what's going on with the remote working. We talked about hoteling space, and especially as I have financial analysts who are perfectly suited to continue, financial admin staff perfectly suited to continue working from home. Then that makes some office space. There's a lot of dynamics in this. So let me see if there's anything else in the chat we want to discuss. Anybody have a question they want to unmute and ask, or share something they want to share? It's okay if you're shy and you want to just put it in the chat. I think there's some good conversation in there.
Yeah, definitely a lot of, oh, go ahead, Sarah.
I was gonna say, one of the questions that I'll throw out to see if anyone's had some good thinking about it too is one of my big concerns as we are talking about hybrid telecommuting, some in, some out, is that kind of equitable feeling like you're a part of the conversation, you're feeling like you're part of the decisions that matter. It's like in the old like early, the 1990s, or like the Seinfeld joke, like if you're on the smoke break with your boss, then you get access to stuff that people who are telecommuting can't. And I feel like we're about to recreate something very similar. The have and have nots of just access to people making decisions. And so I'm trying really hard to think of ways like making sure every conference room is outfitted right with the camera, as everyone now, like in a laptop world, there's not docking stations. Are you making sure you're really thinking about the casual conversations that everyone's so excited to have those impromptu, creative, casual conversations in the hallway again. But what if you're out of the office that day and now someone, like just that nerve, like that feeling of being left out of what's happening on your campus. And again, I like to throw out things. I don't have solutions for it, but it's just definitely something that we're thinking about, especially as we're moving forward in more of this hybrid situation. So interested to see if anybody else has been thinking about that or solved it already. I'm definitely willing to hear that too.
Sarah, you mentioned, and I think it's interesting when I believe Ramona, you may have talked a little bit about productivity and what does that look like. And again, thinking more about remote working or telecommuting, I think about my own productivity and the amount of time that I have gained by not having to walk 15 minutes across campus to a meeting and 15 minutes back has been really valuable for me and my productivity. But as you just so eloquently said, the trade-off between the impromptu conversation or the immersive experience that both I feel like we value as employees and our students value as students is something that can be sacrificed when those things aren't there. It's hard. No answers here. I'm with you.
I'm envisioning that, we've done some, and Dwayne's been very helpful with this at Davis, kind of reusing some fun ways to stay connected during this time that we have been forced to work remotely. So even staff that are physically on campus can call in to, and do some things. So I think we're going to continue some of that. I know it's funny, and I just had this observation, Sarah, to your comment, the three of us panelists and Dwayne got on the call at 11:30. And I think Dwayne was being very tasky, going, okay, you can all say hello, and then just we'll check in at 5 to 12. We sat and chatted the whole time because I'm like, I don't know you, Kenny. Let me learn a little bit more you. And Sarah and I had a very more kind of passing business. And I'm like, tell me more about Sarah, about what. So we just did the human thing and just caught up, which I think we all miss. And that is what that kind of free time in between meetings, and now Kenny, I think I'll pick on you, but I'm like, okay, now I have someone I know at University of Houston and kind of some things I've learned about you. And that's what this whole webinar is about. So I think we're going to have to use this technology for those, but Sarah, you're right. I mean, even just our forward facing staff, I'd see the custodian in the hallway and you get to say hello. That I'm not going to get that opportunity if I'm remote working. And that's important too, especially as in a management position so I am going to be back, not every day, I'm hoping, but I will be back on campus just because of the nature of my role.
No, that's great. Thank you. I'm looking at time. I'm going to put one more question in the chat to kind of try to close this up. And then to Ramona's point, speaking of just the point of this roundtable and this opportunity to connect, and I'll have one quick slide to share with everyone about what's next. So really quick, I'll put it in the chat for our panelists. What is one nugget of wisdom regarding staffing you would like to share with us, or any other strategies? So again, however you want to take that, recognizing we have a few minutes left. Any nuggets of wisdom?
I think I was hoping to hear some nuggets of wisdom, like more of my self-support group from all of you. I still feel like trying to manage day by day and make sure that you're taking care of your staff as best you can and figure out, and learn from everybody. So I think that maybe that's my only nugget of wisdom, is constantly hearing how other people are doing it, because this is so, like, our favorite word right now, unprecedented. There's so many cool solutions out there that we're so busy and overwhelmed or stressed or whatever word, that all of your stress behaviors come out and that creativity gets sapped. So rely on the people that you trust to help you get out of that box a little bit.
think oh, sorry, Ramona.
You go, please.
I was going to say, for me, one of the things that we've had a lot of struggles this year in Houston. We had a horrific ice storm. We've had I say ice storm. It was just freezing cold here. And for Houston, it was cold. Okay. So if you're in a northern climate, don't pick on me. We've had, I think we managed 3 tropical hurricane threats this last summer, some real close calls for us that we had to prepare for. We've had the pandemic. We've had a lot of staff upset. We've had a lot of challenges. Everyone has. One of the things that I continue to go back to is, for me, I know that I have a lot of buy-in to our department's mission, vision, and values. I had a lot to do with the formulation of those, fortunately. And so when I think times get tough for me, what I usually go back to is what those mission, visions, and values look like for the department. And we talk a lot about whole person development, working and leading with an ethic of care, and what those things mean. It doesn't necessarily provide me answers, but it does provide me with some insight on my personal why I do the work that I do, and allows me to reconnect with that work in a way that gives me purpose and gives me some sense of control, even if it is just a perceived sense of control, because none of us have had any control with any of this, I don't think. And so again, my nugget of wisdom, or the thing that I lean on and has been our mission, values, and vision, and how that relates to my personal values.
Thank you, Kenny. I would add something that I started 2 years ago. So in the spring of 19 was what I got from our campus HR, what I called retention interviews. So it was actually some third-party company had a set of 11 questions that they encourage you to ask staff. And I have one of those staff. I see her on the screen now in our team, and so I went back and did that. I was going to do it last spring, and COVID, screwed that up. So I asked them again this last month, and I would say that's another way. That was the tool that I've used. But talk to your staff, ask them, and ask them questions. How are you doing? What's going on? And I would say not just those that are gonna have been teleworking, primarily, but also staff who may not have been. And sometimes, again, I had this custodian email and said, well, all the administrative staff are just kicked back and behind their computers. And I'm going, that's a misconception that this person has about what work they're doing. And so I'm having an conversation with that person. But I think I think that would be a tip that I would share is, especially those of us that are in leadership roles, to just engage the staff and hear them out. You might hear some patterns. It might just be that you at least hear what they have to say. And I think that's going to just help us get through this unprecedented time.
Thank you, Ramona, Kenny, Sarah. Really quick before I give some kudos to them, I'm going to really share my screen again. I went ahead and put it in the chat. Our June roundtable. Sorry if my screen's frozen. Okay. I was frozen for a minute, so I was like watching, my mouth was not moving. So anywho, the next roundtable for the ACUHO-I Business Operations Series is June 8th. Fall is around the corner. Let's plan together. We're gonna have a few different sub-themes in terms of fall planning, from assignments, different things like that. I know in a recent call we had with the committee, we were talking about over-enrollment and how that's impacting housing and what that looks like. So I'm gonna unshare my screen. And I mentioned this at the beginning of the call. After today, we're going to send a follow-up email to all of our attendees, and that's going to include the link for the June roundtable, as well as some additional resources. It's also going to include the contact information for our wonderful panelists. In the case you learn something, you have another question, you want to engage with them. So definitely feel free to utilize that email to continue connecting with the ACUHO-I business operations. And really quick, because I know 3 minutes left. Thank you, Sarah, Kenny, and Ramona. Feel free to use the Zoom reaction and give them a clap, heart, whatever you prefer. Also, thanks to other folks for engaging with us in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and save that and put it in a Word doc and put it with that email so you all can see what some other campuses have done or have shared with their experience. With that, we have a few minutes left. If you all want to connect, that's going to be the end of our formal roundtable. Thank you again. And again, thank you to Ramona, Sarah, and Kenny. So feel free to stick around and unmute if you want to ask more questions or continue to conversate in the next 2 minutes. Thank you all for joining us today.